Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by CyberArk on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Brian Ware, the Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Homeland Security Department. Now, Brian, before break, we were talking a lot about information sharing, threat intelligence sharing, risk management in some ways. And one of the things you mentioned several times is be able to help agencies understand the threats they face, understand the vulnerabilities that they may face through things like Einstein and CDM and other and TIC type of programs. Let's talk about some of those trends you're seeing. I know ransomware is still big. I know spear phishing is among the biggest challenges agencies face. And now with the coronavirus pandemic emergency, agencies facing a lot bigger threat surface. So lead us off. What are some of those trends?
Yeah, I think there are four primary trends that we're seeing and that we're concerned about, and you hit on almost all of them. So, phishing is nothing new. What's new right now is that the lure that's being used in phishing attempts is COVID related, right? And so we've seen this. We published some things with the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK and others where adversaries are disguising their emails as coming from the director of the World Health Organization or something along those lines. Again, with the attempt of harvesting credentials for the most part. So certainly we are seeing that same kind of bad actors, same kinds of reasons. It's just that the lure right now is COVID or financial stimulus dollars or small business loans. And, in a time when people are desperate for information, I think that there's an even more challenging situation to deal with in that particular threat. The second thing that we're seeing that you mentioned is ransomware. And we've been very concerned about ransomware scenarios that might have an impact on public health agencies' ability to deliver care. That was probably one of our largest concerns as we headed into this period of time. We've seen that kind of activity in Europe, in particular, a large German hospital company, corporation, as well as a Czechoslovakian, a Czech Republic care provider. In both cases, impacting healthcare, not significantly, but certainly having an impact on COVID-related healthcare. I think we've been fortunate here in the U.S. that we haven't seen major ransomware scenarios in the last few weeks and months, but it's still something we're very concerned about. We're actively working with our law enforcement colleagues in particular to try to prevent and take those down, before there's anything successful there. The third thing that maybe you didn't mention that I just wanted to highlight is that also in this period of time, our adversaries, nation-state adversaries, have shown an increased interest in COVID-related vaccine development, laboratory data, research, anything that's going to get the United States, get the world to a treatment for COVID, to get us out of the crisis that we're in, has become a focus area for our nation-state adversaries. And China in particular has a decades-long strategy of conducting espionage against U.S. research and industry and transferring that technology to Chinese domestic manufacturers and research institutions. And so we have seen not just China, but especially China, those actors that are targeting the United States. This is both governments and universities and public health agencies and companies. And this is an area where we've been very active. We published something with the FBI specifically talking about the Chinese targeting of research institutions. The last thing that you mentioned, I think, is really critically important, particularly for this audience, for CIOs, and that is our risk posture. And I would expand it from a threat surface, but the idea of the risk surface has completely changed for the enterprise as we shifted to telework. Or the maximum telework policy of the U.S. government has meant that all of us are working from home. We're working sometimes over VPN connections. We're working through collaboration tools and video conferencing tools and email tools in ways that maybe we had before, but only a small part of the workforce and a portion of the time. And now it's the majority of the workforce, the majority of the time using those tools. And what that does is it changes the way that you do security. It changes the targets for the adversary. It changes our ability to monitor and have visibility. We've also seen agencies that have had to rush to deploy things that have had misconfiguration errors. But I think the most important thing here is that so often, I think the conventional wisdom in cybersecurity still holds that most of the vulnerabilities that are being exploited have been around for a very long time, are very well known, and could be patched but have not yet been patched. And we did some analysis that we published about 3 weeks ago, where we looked at vulnerabilities. What was unique about this analysis is not just the prevalence of the vulnerabilities, but the vulnerabilities that have been most targeted by adversaries. So the ones that are actually being exploited by adversaries. We looked at those from 2017 to 2019. Many of those have been patchable for years, still being targeted, still being exploited. It's kind of the old tools that still work for the bad guys, so they're going to just keep on using those tools. But we also looked at this current period, what's been going on in 2020 so far, and I think no surprise, but confirmed in our data and our analysis, nation state adversaries in particular are targeting virtual private network vulnerabilities, Citrix vulnerabilities, Pulse VPN vulnerabilities. We have published about these for more than a year now. There have been patches and mitigations that have been available for some period of time, but we're not all patched, and our adversaries know that, and those are the things that they're going after, and harder, of course, for us to deal with now as we're remote working. So I think that's, remote working feels like it's something that's going to be here for a long time, and maybe we're all going to learn ways that we can remotely work much more significantly than we have in the past. And so getting after those vulnerabilities and those risks, I think, is going to be a critical order of business really for every company and for every department and agency.
I think there's a little bit of good news in here that ransomware, while has hit a lot of state and local level and maybe even some private sector, it seems like the federal government has been mostly secure from it, or mostly staved off any sort of attacks. And then obviously the phishing attack is something that is the never-ending big challenge. Is there anything that you can give me an update on around improving the phishing, the response, the pushback against those phishing? I know there's DMARC that agencies have been told to implement, and many have. How's that working? And then what are you seeing from that DMARC implementation, and what else can agencies do?
Yeah, DMARC in particular, multi-factor authentication for sure. And then we're doing things as well on both the Einstein program, as well as some additional programs that we're just starting right now to look at protected DNS more broadly. So just ensuring that users are not able to accidentally get to that malicious domain, so syncholling of domains and other domain protections. And so there's a variety of different strategies that we're implementing that are not exclusive to mitigating spear phishing attempts, but certainly a major source of those attempt success. And that we're going after that as aggressively as we can on the .gov side, and then we just need to find ways, which I think are broader whole of government strategic implications, to extend that out into state and local governments and critical infrastructure as well.
One of the things that was interesting about the recent Federal Information Security Management Act report to Congress that OMB put out, that I know DHS played a big role in helping to bring the data together and do the analysis of, is when you look at the top threats or top type of attacks against agencies, email phishing, I think, was still number one, but a big growth was around what they call brute force, attrition type of attacks. And somebody pointed this out to me, another cybersecurity expert, that said a lot of times this is happening because of this idea that that they're getting onto a network and then island hopping, or going from network hopping to network hopping, and that's a big concern. Will these different approaches that you're talking about with DMARC, multi-factor authentication, DNS sinkholing as an example, are those aimed at addressing that, the ability of adversaries to hop from one network to the other?
Yes, and again here, I wish we could find silver bullets, and I wish, part of why I think an agency like CISA exists is to try to do things not in taking off little small pieces, but trying to remove systemic parts of the risks. So, if we can do something on the protected DNS side that removes 80% of the kind of nuanced, unsophisticated potential for attacks, that's a big win. We're still going to have those sophisticated adversaries, those APTs that do come into the perimeter and are attempting to move, from host to host, as you're describing. So there's a number of additional things that we have to do. Network segmentation being a significant one. And these are things that we can provide guidance, but these are things that really right now are done within departments and agencies. I think that the move towards more of a zero trust, assuming that your network perimeter is not, the integrity of that perimeter can't be guaranteed. And in our experience, the perimeter is going to be breached. So when you make that assumption, don't trust everything that's happening inside of the network as though it was as intended. So, a number of the things that we're doing right now are strategic, in the sense that some of them are strategically removing parts of the attack surface. Others of them are working with departments and agencies to re-architect, to rethink, and ultimately, we'll be continuing to evolve. But I think there's a number of things that we have in progress now that have the opportunity to make really substantial and meaningful changes across the .gov.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I may ask you about some of those things that are ongoing. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by CyberArk on Federal News Network.